So in pastoral counseling, we begin with some premises that I really just created and put on paper. That is to say, when we take a look at pastoral counseling, where does this whole thing that we call pastoral counseling come from? Why do we do it? For me, part of the reason that we do it is because we as human beings find ourselves in this world, and as we talked about in our course on the philosophy of human nature, what makes us different from all other animals? Dogs, cats, monkeys, they are so lucky. They are not reflecting on what's happening in their lives. They don't have self-reflective consciousness. They don't know that they know. We know that we know. We are aware that we are aware. And so when we find ourselves in this world, for instance, we confront various realities. For instance, we find, wait a minute, I find that I am alive. Think back to our course in modern philosophy. What did Descartes say? I think, therefore what? I am. Yeah. But anyone who is has to face that question of what will happen to me in the future. Hence our course in death and dying. When we start talking about things like death and dying, it raises certain questions within our mind. Often questions about which we want to speak with other people. So we as human beings are reflective. We think about these issues, these problems, these challenges in a way that other animals don't. Other animals feel hunger. Okay, they're in a predicament, they need to find food, but they're not reflecting on, man, I am just feeling really hungry right now. And no. We as human beings are reflective creatures, and that's what puts us into this predicament of having to think through the situations in which we find ourselves. Another premise is simply that life is filled with challenges. Or later this evening we're going to talk about M. Scott Peck in an award-winning book. I think that this book may have spent more time at the top of the New York Times bestseller list than any other book in history. And he begins his book with the simple sentence, life is suffering. Sounds very Buddhist for those of us who are familiar with the Buddhist tradition. Sounds very Buddhist. Life is filled with suffering. If you're born into this world, got good news for you. Life is all about suffering. How is that good news? I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. Life is about suffering, which simply means that life, for us as human beings who reflect on these things, is filled with various, I prefer to call them challenges. Other people might call them problems or predicaments in which we find ourselves and on which we find ourselves reflecting. Right? I'm struck with whatever illness, okay, suddenly I find myself thinking about that. I'm in whatever relationship that's not going well, okay, I find myself reflecting on this. Another premise that sometimes when we think about these things then, these challenges and these problems that we face, it creates this, or certain feelings within us. The word that I use is it creates angst. It creates a certain angst, a certain anxiousness, a certain unsettling feeling that I can't sleep well at night because I'm thinking about this, whatever this is. Those things that keep us up awake at night are often the things that are the substance of pastoral counseling. Us reaching out and talking with other people. Oh, honey, what happened? You don't look very good. Well, I didn't sleep well last night. Why didn't you sleep well last night? Well, I was thinking about whatever it was that I was thinking about. Right? So, we have these feelings within us, or sometimes these thoughts. The other word that I use is cognitive dissonance, simply meaning that I've always thought a certain way about a certain thing, but now I'm being challenged because someone is saying or doing something that challenges that, right? The example that I thought of in the car while I was driving here, I was thinking of the Holocaust, because one of the people that we're talking about this evening is Viktor Frankl. Do we know the story of Viktor Frankl? An Austrian Jew who was in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. If you're in a concentration camp, what is your chance of getting out of that camp? It is not good. We came up with a word in 20th century theology. We came up with the word theodicy. What is theology? It's theodicy. Theodicy is the problem of evil in this world. Okay, for all you Christians in the room who say that God is good and loving and merciful and compassionate, Tell me how your good and loving God could allow 6 to 7 million Jews, that's 3 times the number of people in this metropolitan statistical area, from Round Rock, Pflugerville, Austin, Buda, Kyle, that's 3 times the amount of people that we have in this city who died in the Holocaust. Tell me how a good God allows that. That causes cognitive dissonance, right? When someone, on the one hand, tells you that God is good and loving, on the other hand, you're reading the headlines in today's newspaper, you're thinking, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. That's called cognitive dissonance. Father Jamie preaches something on Sunday and it sounds so good and wonderful, and then we go back to the reality of our lives and it's like, wait a minute, Father Jamie, right? It causes cognitive dissonance. Vincent?
What was the word again, theodicy?
Theodicy then is the problem of evil in this world. How do we as Christians and as Catholics deal with the question of evil in this world? And it's really, theodicy is really a 20th century phenomena, largely because of the Holocaust. When you have 6 million Jews, that's the population of Los Angeles. When you have 6 million people, innocent people, who die at the hands of other human beings, how could a good God stand by and allow that to happen? That's the question.
How could the church stand by and allow that to happen?
Excuse me?
How was it that the church stood by and also allowed it to happen?
How was it that the church stood by? How was it that all of us, how was it that we here in the United States of America allowed these things to happen?
Right.
How do we sleep well at night knowing that so many things like that continue to happen in this world? Hunger, I'm told, claims about 20,000 people per day. 20,000 people per day die of hunger in this world? That's 20,000 people today, 20,000 people yesterday, 20,000 people tomorrow. That's 60,000 people in these 3 days that are going to die of hunger. How can we be sleeping well at night? Another premise that sometimes as we're reflecting on these challenges then that are causing us to be awake at night or that are causing us cognitive dissonance, sometimes being social creatures, fortunately, there are other people in this world who share the same language, and so if I'm struggling with certain questions, maybe there are other people I can turn to who could help me with this. This is one of the challenges. Typically, another premise would be that I'm going to turn to someone that I can trust. Follow me? If I'm looking for some counsel, some advice, some perspective, am I going to turn to one of my enemies? Someone who I really don't like and who really doesn't like me? Probably not so much. I'm probably going to turn to someone who I think will listen to me. Which probably helps to explain why it is that priests and deacons and people in the church often become targets for those who are looking for help, because we're looking for someone whom we trust. And so in these moments, being social creatures then, sometimes people seek out other people with whom to speak. And I put in these notes, sometimes people, especially extroverts, reach out to others. What is an extrovert? We'll come back to that next class. But it's essentially how it is that we're going to talk about different personalities and how it is that in this world we classify people according to one personality indicator as either extroverted or introverted. Which are you? We'll find out next week. Are you extroverted? Are you extroverted? Do you think out loud? Are you married to an extrovert? Right? Do you have any friends who are extroverts? Any thought that comes into their mind, you know it because there is not a silent thought in their head. Everything is they talk out all of their ideas, right? Or are you an introvert? What is an introvert? Just the opposite. You often don't know what an introvert is thinking. He or she holds his or her cards to the chest. If I'm thinking something, I'm thinking it. I'm not necessarily processing out loud. I'm processing inside my head. It may be a surprise. Most people think Father Jamie's an extrovert. Actually, I'm more of an introvert. I tend to think through these things on my own without talking with other people. I know all sorts of extroverts, friends, family members. It's just the opposite. When something's on their mind, you know it because they're looking for someone to listen. Not necessarily looking for answers or solutions. They're just they are processing out loud, and I'm simply being that presence with whom they're processing. extroverts. So some people, especially extroverts, look for others with whom they can process this. Introverts, those who process on the inside, typically will, if we're in a serious bind, in a serious situation, can't figure this out, then we go to someone. Then if an introvert comes to you, you know it's pretty serious, right?
Yeah.
Extroverts, you hear it all the time. Every morning when you wake up at the breakfast table, man, there here she goes again. Right? And we tend to turn down the volume and enjoy breakfast. Right? So being social creatures then, sometimes we tend to talk about our challenges, our problems with other people. Another premise, we'll talk more, there was a book that was written called Crucial Conversations, which simply means that there are some things that we really don't like to talk about. Think, for instance, in your own relationships, the people who are close to you, are there certain things that you don't talk about for whatever reasons? Those crucial conversations, these authors say, often end up sharing three characteristics. That crucial conversations often have high stakes, right? If we were to have this conversation, it could affect our relationship. The stakes are high, right? If I were to tell you what I really think or feel, or who I really am, then the stakes are high. It would change your opinion of me. Stakes are high. Opinions vary, simply meaning that there may not be agreement on how to see these things. One person looks at it from one perspective, one person looks at it from another perspective, and they may not be seeing the same thing. Really, they're seeing the same thing, but from a different perspective. I often use the example, for instance, of a Bible. I'll hold up a Bible, right? Some people look at that book and say that it's a Bible. For those of you who are looking at the cover where it says Bible, you see one thing. For those of us who are looking at it from another perspective, we see a totally different thing. And crucial conversations often involve strong emotions, simply meaning sometimes strong emotions, anger, disappointment, frustration, whatever it is, are the things that we're feeling at these times of these conversations, right? At the passing of a family member or friend, right? We feel different, strong emotions. Those are crucial conversations that we have with people at those moments, right? When we're really angered by something, emotions are high. And so in such situations, what are we looking for? Again, we're looking for help, some sort of counsel or perspective, or ultimately a solution, a way of getting from where we are and what we're feeling right now to somehow being at peace again. Finding some hope, some good word in all of this.